the swag on. Get the swag on.
My name is Raphael Grignani. I'm a trained industrial designer. I practice as an interaction designer and then a product designer. And I'm now a CEO. I'm French, but I've never worked here. So it's very difficult for me to actually say anything meaningful in French or that you can understand. Moved to the UK quite early on and then went to Finland for a long time, 4 winters. And that's really long. And then I've been in the US for the past 9 years, I think. I spent nearly 8 years at Nokia, so part in Finland, part in Los Angeles, where some of Nicholas' colleagues are currently working. And then I worked at Method, a design agency with offices in San Francisco, New York, and London. And we did a lot of work for like Microsoft and Google's and a lot of startups, both in the US, but also in the Middle East and in Asia. 3 years ago, Jennifer Bove, a friend of mine, and I realized that there's very little history of a discipline of like digital media. And every year we have students doing the same project over and over and companies trying to launch the same thing without necessarily learning about anything. And they're mostly crap. So we decided to start a design award, which is another design award, but the intent really was to start to build a history of a discipline so people could go back and see what trends or what things designers found important in like 2010, 2011, and so on. So it's in the 3rd year now, and they're going to announce the winner, I think, in January or February in Amsterdam at the IXDA conference. And then I'm a co-founder and CEO of Jauntful. Jauntful is it's a new service that helps you create mini city guides or mini guides of your favorite places in the places that you love, and they're made for your friends, people that you know, so you can actually recommend your best tips without everyone knowing about it. Today, I'm going to talk about design-led startups. What I mean by that is, as in design-led, which is the way you organize your company and use design as a vector of competition against other companies, and the primary way you want to compete in the marketplace. Up until now, a lot of companies use technology as a vector or maybe a business model, but more recently, design has emerged as a viable vector to compete. And I'm going to explain why is that and the role of designers, but also the role of other people participating in the startup. And I'm also going to talk about designer-led as in having a designer as your CEO, which brings a different set of problems. And I want to explain what are those problems so you can actually understand what that means. But I want to start with what's a startup. And you guys can answer in French or in English, however you want. But I'd like to hear your definitions or your understanding of what a startup is from here.
Just behind you.
What's behind me?
Yeah.
So a startup is not a smaller version of a large company. It's a temporary organization in search of a scalable. OK, so that's one definition, right? There's the Steve Blank definition, which is, as you said, it's a temporary organization in search of a business model, and a business model that is repeatable. So trying to find a way to actually make money. And along the way, most startups iterate on that business model or pivot a little bit, meaning like change focus for a while until it finds that repeatable business model. And if you don't find it and you run out of money, you're kind of screwed. And it's kind of new as a model to be able to start a company with someone else's money and having a runway to find something that makes sense until you run out of money. Most people so far started companies with a business model at the core of it, like a viable business model at the core of it, otherwise they wouldn't succeed. Because especially in France, the model is to borrow money from the bank and you have to give that money back. When you borrow money from a VC, you don't have to give the money back, which is pretty convenient. But it also puts you in a specific trajectory in how much money your company needs to make to actually be a viable startup, right? Like if you don't have the hockey curve for revenue or user or whatever, they don't really like you and they're not going to give you money in your Series A or B or C. So it kind of sets a lot of constraints. The other one is, and that's Eric Ries's definition, is it's an organization dedicated to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. And that's why the VC model exists. So they give you money so you can do stuff until you figure out what it is that you do in a successful manner. The last definition, which I like a lot, comes from Teller, from Penn and Teller. They're magicians. And basically what they say about magic is that sometimes magic is just someone spending more time on something than anyone would reasonably expect. And that's pretty much what a startup is, right? Like if you remove magic with entrepreneurship or company or whatnot, that's pretty much it. If you don't believe in what you're doing in a stupid way and don't go after it in an unreasonable manner, you're not going to succeed, right? And that's why 90% of startups actually don't continue. So you can be a magician after. So if you have a startup, there's two things you actually need to worry about. And whether you're a founder or you're an employee. Because if you're like 2, 3, 5, 10, you need to care about technology, which is, can we build it? And you need to care about the market, which is, will they buy it? The thing is, can we build it is not really a question anymore, because Amazon and Google and Microsoft took care of that in the late 90s and early 2000s. For 90% of the startup, technology is not really a differentiator. It's not that hard to build stuff. And if it's not that hard to build stuff, because you can use like Amazon Cloud Services and Heroku and GitHub and all that stuff, the question becomes, should you build it? Is it actually worth your time? Is it actually worth my time? And do I really care about the things that you're making? And that is the designer stock in trade. That's the thing designers are really good at, is they intuitively know how things work, and they're deeply interested in people. And if you're deeply interested in people, then it kind of gives you an insight on, is that actually worth doing? Will people accept that product? Is there a need for that product? Is the behavior exist for that product? So typically designers are pretty good at methods and processes. So how to take something that doesn't exist, which you were somewhat explaining, and bring like an hypothetical future, which is a product or a thing that doesn't exist, and then make it real. So bridging that gap, designers are pretty good at it. And they're good at it because, again, like they understand people and customers. People and customers are two different things. Like people is just whatever. Customers are people that give you their money for your thing. And that's a pretty big shift between people and customers. If, for example, Pinterest, they have people currently because no one pays for that, which means that you're actually the product, so they sell your stuff to other people so they make money. As opposed to other companies that I'm going to talk after, which actually ask you to pay money directly so they can actually survive. So there's a difference between, that's the key difference between being a person and being a customer. If you're a person and use a product, you usually get screwed in some ways. They're pretty good at designing product, like building product and creating experiences that are compelling for people. They understand brand, and if they understand brand, they also understand culture. And the thing that they don't really understand is, will they buy it? Designers typically are pretty crap at that. Like they're not that interested in what they call the business side of it. But business is just one aspect of it, right? So let's learn business as like business model, like how you make money for a thing. But there's also like legal stuff, and there's finance, and there's ethics, like you were talking about that, about philosophy and the role. Like if you're a designer now at Facebook, you're designing for 1 billion people, right? If you're changing the button somewhere, it impacts 1 billion people. So there's a pretty huge impact in being a designer, potentially. And then there's marketing. Marketing tends to be dismissed, but they're actually the one that know how to sell stuff. And more too often, like people think that if you build something, people will come. Doesn't work that way. Another way to talk to a designer is that, will people use it? And that's language that the designer understand. And that's just, use it or buy it is kind of the same thing, right? If people use it, they'll kind of buy it. So that's another way to look at it. So if we think again of what's a design-led startup is to be successful through experience, through design, and not technology. But it also means putting it often means actually putting users at the center, right? It's understanding users, it's understanding their behavior fully enough to be able to create products that are desirable, that are beautiful, that actually responds to their need and aspiration. So I'm going to give you a bunch of examples. I think Alice talked about Airbnb, and I also have that slide further down. The first one is Jauntful. It's a gifting service that unfortunately shut down recently, but essentially you would go to the site, you would pick a collection of 16 gifts, and you would pick the person that would receive the gift, and they would receive a beautiful booklet in the mail with a beautiful envelope that you see here, and then they would get to pick one product out of the 16 products in that. It's a really beautiful experience, really beautiful packaging. It's really a shame that it's gone. Karma is a 4G hotspot, which has to be one of the worst products that you find at the moment, sold by like Orange and SFR and so on. Those guys took a different take on it. They designed like a pretty nice hardware, but they changed the game a little bit by changing the way you actually get credit or what you pay. So the more you share, the cheaper the service become. So it plays on being altruistic and cooperating with the people around you in cities like Paris, New York, San Francisco, which are usually pretty individualistic, where you're kind of like fighting against the people around you. So I think it's a pretty beautiful service created by designers. Square, those are the beautiful transitions from Apple, right? They're really good at design. This is Square. You guys heard about Square, I'm sure. They've disrupted credit card payment, or they're actually expanding the market of credit cards. A year ago, they changed dramatically the way point of sale system function. And earlier this year, they actually changed marketplace. So they just launched 3 products, disrupted 3 markets, putting kind of like design at the center of it, which is kind of amazing in such a short time. On smaller companies, you have Editorially, which makes writing collaborative. It's a company out of New York or Brooklyn. Again, beautiful product that's now open, like you guys can sign up. That's a slightly different take on a startup, but it's a project by Candy Chan. She's a designer, and she lost someone dear to her maybe 4 years ago, and she started writing down what she wanted to do before she died. And she moved to New Orleans post-Katrina, which was kind of a wreck in a really poor neighborhood. And one day she painted like an abandoned building black and starting drawing lines and writing "before I die" and then blank. And she left like chalk so people can write on it. And within a day, the whole wall was filled. She started receiving email from people as well, and like, can you make a kit out of it so I can do that in my city? It's now in like 400 cities around the world. And she's launching a book. I think the book has launched or is about to launch. And that's just a self-expression kind of art project turned into a company, kind of like despite what she wanted to do with it. A spin-off of that is Neighborland, which is kind of the same thing. This Candy Chan and our partner started to put stickers or gift stickers to people that says, what do you want that place to be? And then blank. And people would put stickers on like abandoned building or abandoned stores to say, oh, I want this to be a library, I want this to be a supermarket, I want this to be whatever. I want this to be renovated, I want this to be cleaned up. And that started to be like civic interaction between people living in a city and the city government or the private entities. And that as well has become a startup out of that. It's a pretty beautiful project or like company. On the hardware side, Nest, who took like Home Depot or Castorama products that seemingly are useless and then connected them to the internet and designed beautiful experience around it, and suddenly that costs $200 and everyone wants it. But it also changed the way you think about energy in your home. They launched this 2 years ago, and they launched a smoke detector 3 weeks ago in the US. This is Pinterest. There's been thousands of these before. No one really took off, but this one took off because they actually focus on their audience instead of rejecting their audience. If you guys are designers, you might be aware of Supply, which was a similar thing, except the Supply guys were seeing that the product was used mostly by women, but they wanted to keep an equal skew between genders, as those guys completely embrace their audience, which is mostly women. And that was the group that actually took them to success in a very, very short time. Dribble, another example. There's a lot of, this is a tough one for a designer because it's supposedly a website to share work in progress, but there's something that's called dribbleization of design at the moment, meaning that if someone does something interesting, within 5 minutes, 200 people do something kind of like this, and it becomes a trend, kind of, and really make it really cheap and commoditize innovation and skills. So that's kind of whatever. But if you're hiring designers, it's still good to see if they have a Dribble account and see their level of craft. So that's pretty good. Tumblr sold for $1 billion 6 months ago. David Karp famously is only interested in the product. He didn't really care about business. And until the very last minute, until they got acquired by Yahoo, he still didn't care about it. And he was a designer, started with him and Marco Arment in New York. They started as a consultancy and then built Tumblr on the side. Mailbox, ex-IDEO guys that started to make a to-do list and then realized that a to-do list didn't work, so they made email client, and they actually built a pretty interesting feature for their waiting list, where you had like a countdown on how many people were in front of you, and people were like checking stuff like every 5 minutes and see they're like number 30,002, and then you're like 29,056 until you get in. And like a lot of companies have actually adopted that system. So the email client in itself, I don't think is that great, but the way they launched the product was amazing and kind of like made what they are. Got acquired like 2 weeks after launch, I think. And then Airbnb, 3 industrial designers. The product started during IDSA in 2007, I think, or 2006, which was in San Francisco. There was like thousands of designers coming to San Francisco, no hotels. So they decided to rent their sofa and made a little kit and whatever, took the people around, and then decided to make a website out of it. So there's tons of really successful companies that use design to drive massive value creation. And arguably at the moment, a lot more than engineering. But the thing is that it has to be part of your DNA. You cannot add design at the end. Like, it's not a thing that you do at the last minute. You need to care about it from the very beginning. It needs to be part of your company. It needs to be part of the thing you really care about. And that's a problem at the moment because very few people understand that. Most of the VC community comes from a business and engineering background. So the first thing that needs to go when like the rubber hit the road is design or like user experience. And that's the same with companies that are like mostly focused on engineering and business. Like they don't really value design as the core of it. If you really want to win with design or like use it as a key differentiator, it needs to be really part of it. Like it's equal footing with other people. But at the end of the day, like bringing a new product to market is just change management, right? As you were saying, is like taking something that doesn't really exist into existence. Michael Slaby, who's the CTO of Obama for America, was just saying, like, change management is not complicated, it's just really hard. And that's kind of the end of it. It's really hard. And also, O'Reilly, like Tim, was saying that you need to create more value than what you capture. It means that you can't go out there alone. Like if you're the only one to capture value in what you're doing, you're not going to succeed in the long run. Like you need to create an ecosystem to have other people work with you, help you to become successful. You can't do that on your own, especially at the moment. So all the companies that have been successful recently, all the things on the technical side, it's called APIs, which means like you open your service to other people to do stuff. You can do that socially. There's many ways to do that. But to some degree, the companies that share the most are the most successful at the moment. Like even if you think that you have that one thing that no one is that you need to protect above everything else, I don't think it matters. Like be as open as possible, as collaborative as possible to actually use everyone's energy to like bring success. And the last thing I want to close is that like the designer's role is to envision tomorrow. That's what designers do. And a startup exists to bring tomorrows into existence. If you're interested in bringing a startup, like doing a startup or launching a product, I think you just need to do it fully. Like just put everything in, use as many resources as you can, and leverage everyone's strengths as much as you can. Don't discount the people that you have. Don't discount like skills and knowledge. Just take everything in and just go for it. Just be bold. Thank you.